Hi all! Recently Airbyte introduced low-code CDK, which is super awesome, as it reduces so much headache within the connector development. When compared to the other CDKs, low-code is the master. In a single word, it is efficient. So with much excitement in mind, I decided to migrate a connector to prove that I'm not lazy. So I chose Mailgun connector for migration. After some minutes, I totally regretted my decision, as it requires so much knowledge of a connector. Luckily, documentation came to the rescue. So if you're developing, maintaining, or migrating a connector, to make things easier for you, here is the tutorial with some hacks to make things fun. Before moving on, I believed you watched videos of Airbyte team for setting up the repository in your machine, and I also believe that you are ready with your base URL and required authentication. I know you do. First things during migration of a connector from other CDKs is that you have to run generator. I'm using WSL for accessing my codebase. So moving on to that path and then opening it with Visual Studio Code. As you could see, the Mailgun source connector is being developed with Python CDK. As the source file, that is the source.py file, contains all the necessary contents for the connector. So moving on to the generation part, we could go to Airbyte integrations, connector templates, and open with generator with generate. Before that, I missed one simple step of taking a backup of that existing connector. We have to rename it because it will be a conflict if we generate with the same name. So I renamed with mailgun backup and then I typed generate. So when I execute it, generator will be executed in the Docker and then some of the options will be shown. We are using configuration-based source, that is the low code. So given a name as mailgun, and let the definition ID be the same, and the random. So we have basically generated a boilerplate code for mailgun using the low-code CDK. As you could see, the version control is showing the difference. So that's the generator. Number 2, the docs, metadata, and Dockerfile. So moving on, there are some differences in metadata.yaml after we generate it. So in the version control, we could see the differences. So we could make some necessary changes if needed. The definition ID could be same as we are just migrating this connector. So the previous version is 0.1.1 and then as we are migrating it, this is a minor change. So we could see that it could be 0.2.0 and we could add a release date and adding a host for calling the API, that is api.mailgun.in. And also, the OSS and cloud could be the same, which is true and true. So these are all the necessary changes that is required in the metadata.yaml. We don't have to change much things. So moving on to Dockerfile. In the Dockerfile, we only need to change the version. So changing the version to 0.2.0, we should do the same as the metadata.yaml. And moving below to the docs file, inside the docs folder, inside the source integration, we could see the mailgun.md. We need to add 0.2.0 version, and what is the specific change for that? So we add like today's date, and then the pull request is to be executed, to be dated, to be announced. Migrate connector to low code. And yeah, that's pretty much enough. Okay, so that is the docs. Number three, which is schemas, spec, and config. So after setting up the version, we could see in the boilerplate code, there are some schemas like customers, employees, etc. So in the backup folder, as you could see, there are some existing schemas in the mailgun folder. So we could just copy it, the whole folder, and then delete the boilerplate code schemas like this, and we could just paste it. So that is pretty much the whole part for schemas. And as the next part, we have to give the spec for our manifest. So copying the previous spec, and we could use online converters like JSON to YAML converters. And pasting the JSON, we could get the YAML file. So copying the YAML, we have to make a spec.yaml inside the source, which is in the same folder of the manifest. And we could just paste that. And that is all about the spec. You have to cleanse some lint, and that is the spec.yaml. And at the final part, inside the integration test, we have to revert every boilerplate changes. We don't want to change any of these. So reverting that, reverting invalid config, and also we could revert configured catalog, configured catalog, abnormal state also we could revert. Configured catalog. And after reverting everything as this, our folder would look like this. Number 4 is the manifest featuring pagination and incremental sync. Setting up manifest is one of the most important and crucial part while developing or migrating a connector to low-code CDK. So, as you could see, the generator already provides a boilerplate code inside the manifest file. It contains some example URL with some basic bearer authentication and already set up with an example customer stream. So for explanation purposes, I have already written everything that is needed for the Mailgun connector in the manifest down here. So let me remove everything that is unwanted. So how do I write this? In this previous definition of the source file, we could see the version control, and expanding this, you could see so many things that is needed for this migration. So in the first line, you could see there are two different base URLs. For the EU regions, it is using this kind of base URL, and for the US regions, it is using this kind of base URL. So keeping that in mind, and it has a next page token, that means it is using pagination. And next, one of the stream classes, that is domains. It has a primary key, and it is using a path called domains. And also there are some incremental streams, which is events. Event class, event stream uses incremental methods. So it has also a primary key and a cursor field, and that is pretty much it. So as I said, it uses two different kinds of URL according to what region it resides. That means inputting the domain region, the spec, you could also see that domain region could be explicitly set. So using that, if you set that secret config as US, it will use first URL, and if it is different, it could use second kind of URL. So it could be write in the YAML files in this format, including a piping operator and opening two curly braces and writing like this. So it is simply an if-else condition writing in the syntax of YAML files. So that is about the URL base, and it can be differentiated like this. So moving on to authentication, in the source file you could see the previous definition. While checking for the connection, it is using authentication of API authentication, that is private key. Using the manifest, we could write like this. We could also check with the Mailgun documentation for more information. So after this request is set, we could move on to writing the streams. So writing the domain stream is like this. We could call the base stream and the parameters path, name, and the primary key. This is my writing style. Each one has their own writing styles to be precise. So after this domain stream is set, we could get back to pagination. So as you could see in the source file, domain stream uses a pagination method. So moving back, domain streams is getting the next page by paging and dot next. It is using a type of cursor pagination, so moving on to manifest, a base paginator that is type of cursor pagination. That means I could get the value of the next and input as the URL base. So that is the basic method of this mailgun pagination. Each connector uses different kind of pagination methods, and you have to refer the documentation for it. So that is the pagination method. So moving on to event stream, it uses the same reference of the base stream and the parameters and the pagination. The one thing that is different is incremental sync. It uses timestamp cursor field. And it also uses Unix kind of timestamp. Not like ISO type, Unix varies like it is shown with seconds time. The cursor field can be explicitly set at the parameter. The incremental timestamp will be reflected back here. So as I said before, timestamp uses seconds, that is Unix timestamp. And I'm setting configurations of start date in my secrets. So it has a format like this, and the end time is today's UTC. So if I set this explicitly, that is my incremental sync. So after these two streams are set, our manifest file configuration is almost ready. We set up the requester, URL base, and the basic authentication method. And also after that, we set explicitly with the different kind of pagination which is required, and also incremental sync which is required. One thing that I missed is in every response, it is included, the returning response is included inside the item subject. So we could explicitly set using the selector path. So in each response, only the objects or arrays inside that items would be read. And that is pretty much it. Number 5 is the building and testing. So after configuring everything, that is including the manifest, spec, schemas, integration test, metadata, and version and docs, you're ready for building and testing. So moving on to the path where our source Airbyte folder is residing, we have to make a Python virtual environment. So moving on to source, that is Airbyte integration, connectors, source, and mailgun. We have to make like env.en. We have to then activate it and then let install read the requirements.txt. So let it connect and install. At the parallel, we could test our API using Postman. So as I could see, this api.mailgun.dev would be my base URL, and I'm testing out domains. So setting up the authorization as basic auth with my API authentication with my private key. If I send a request, yes, it is success and my API key works. So as I said before in the manifest, every object or array is inside the items. So we set things right. So also going back, yes, it is installed. Now we should build a image like Docker image using this command. Mailgun develop. Oh, I have to activate my Docker. And yes, my Docker and Kubernetes is activated. And now if I build it using docker build dot hyphen t and giving it a name, yes, it is being built, and we could test it via pytest. Python -m pytest integration test -p integration test dot accepted. So after some struggles and error resolving methods, I took this integration test into full pass state. So this is pretty much it. And also, always look out for the version update in the docs. This is me, BTK Code Dev, and thank you for watching.